Gorgeous faces. It's so good to see you guys. Okay, it's so nice to have everyone. We've got everyone joining quickly. It's lovely to have you here. I'm going to do a quick recap of the rules. I'm going to preface with, and I'm going to do this before every call now, and I'm not going to forget, we have some big changes coming up on Cup of Joe on the playlist. I'm going to really start being smart because I've been ignoring the algorithms and all the things we're supposed to do. So on the behalf of the guests and for all of you guys, I'm going to ask what the podcast people do. If you have not already subscribed to the channel, please, it would be wonderful. It helps more people listen to our fabulous guests, and it helps spread the word. And I'm going to be doing a revamping of the website very soon, so announcements will come. And also, please don't forget, if you have a question, the rules are it has to be quirky. I really don't want to hear the same, what's your favorite genre? We can find that somewhere else on the big World Wide Web. I want things like, what's the weirdest pair of socks you've ever worn? I want that kind of level of quirky. So type your questions in with the word question in front. If that word's not there, I'll assume you're just chatting amongst yourselves. And I will filter them through to Travis. Travis, you all know Travis. We all know Travis. He's one of our own. He's on Discord all the time. He's been on another Cup of Joe call with Avon Shore. But the thing I like the most about Travis is, I mean, he's a prolific narrator with a very successful career, but he writes these amazing posts. Everything Travis writes, everyone goes, yes, oh my God, that's what I was trying to say. And I was saying before the call, basically, Travis is it's a big finger up to the hierarchy. Travis is not afraid to say what he thinks at all times. He's respectful, he's professional, he's carved a place in the industry, but he empowers us to be ourselves. And I want to start off a little bit with your background, Travis. I know we might have gone over a bit of this on the Joe call, but maybe if you could give us the kind of for people that weren't on it, the short story about, how you started. You were a game developer. You've done proper games that people out there play and everything,
mm-hmm.
And how you went from that to doing audiobooks and everything.
Okay. So short and sweet. I was a video game developer for, I think, 20 years. I co-owned and ran studios. I'm an engineer by trade, like a software engineer and a game designer. That was what I did. That's what I thought I was going to do for the rest of my life.
Was it what you dreamt of doing, though? Was it when you were a little kid?
When I was a little, I think I wanted to make I think I wanted to be a Disney animator, and I wanted to build robots and probably be a cowboy. But, you kind of lose those as you go along. Eventually, at some point, I decided I wanted to make video games because it incorporates lots of different things. You have art and audio and writing and math and all kinds of stuff.
All of those. I mean, you could have
even covers a lot of creative bases. Yeah, probably could have.
Yeah.
But I did that for a long time, and I started doing audiobooks because I got the equipment to do VO recording so that I wouldn't have to book studio time to do game VO. And I'd been reading to my wife and kids for years, and they didn't really need it anymore. And I had this equipment and stumbled across ACX. And so I started doing it, and I discovered I really liked it. And I kept doing it on the side for several years, and eventually decided you kind of, in your career, you sort of kind of feel the wheels take off. The plane starts to take off. You feel like you're starting to get in the air. And once I reached that point, I decided I actually like this more. And why not have two careers? I don't have to do one thing my whole life. So I switched, and I love it.
Yeah, I had a conversation with somebody the other day about that, and they were like, well, I don't know what genre I should do. I'm like, why do you have to pick? If you don't know right now, I mean, do what you like as long as you like it. And then when you stop liking it,
Well,
don't.
just in the, yeah, just the idea that you're stuck with your first choices on things is really kind of
Yeah.
unfortunate. You know, it's not like most of this job that we're doing right now, none of us couldn't even have conceived that we were doing it. It simply didn't exist. When we were going to college, I couldn't have said, boy, I'm going to go and be an audiobook narrator, and all of my audiobooks will appear on this device that hasn't been invented yet, that people will happen to use, you know.
Yeah.
No one could have predicted that. So being open to change and saying, this is what I decided to do, but now I've revised my opinion based on all the data available to me, and I'm going to do something else. And just being free to do that is kind of amazing.
Yeah. Growth mindset. I mean, there's a whole book about that, isn't there? You have a question already. Deborah wants to know, what's the coolest skill you brought with you from software engineering to narration?
Learning through iteration. So being able to evaluate something and decide what's working and what isn't working, to troubleshoot and figure out why it isn't doing what you want to do it different the next time, and then evaluate whether the change was positive or negative. And be able to do that very swiftly over and over and over and over and over again. I think that kind of iteration is inherent to software development. That's how you solve problems and fix bugs and make things that work better and better until you eventually ship a product. And having that kind of mindset about audio and marrying it with kind of the art of it is really, really a potent tool that's been really useful for me.
Do you think that kind of skill, engineer, software developer, do you think it's more of a factor of personality and some people, their minds just work that way? Or do you think it's having the interest and actually learning it, and that most anyone could learn it?
I think anyone can learn it. I think it's a learned skill set. I think mostly it just starts with an interest in, if you have an interest in doing that kind of work, but then the skill set follows, because it's just something that you need and will develop naturally as you do it. And it's an obvious skill set to acquire when you're doing engineering because of the nature of the work. It's a less obvious skill to pick up when you're doing something like narration or something that is, you know, maybe let's say more abstract, but it's just as useful. You know, when you're analyzing the text on a page or trying to divine the author's intent or deciding whether the way that you've used your voice to elicit emotion is actually functioning. It's like learning to tell a joke. You can break down into a mechanical way how to tell a joke, the pacing of how to tell a joke, whether you're going up on the end of a sentence or down. What makes this funny? You can break it down into its component parts and figure it out. It's hard to talk about because it's complicated.
Yeah.
But you can continue to break it down into these component parts, and you can become better at telling a joke. If you tell a joke over and over and over and you get a sense for how the parts work, you can tell the joke more and more successfully. And so, but it's not the same as saying, oh, I've got an equation, I need to figure out if this works. I can look at these logical aspects and say, you know, A plus B equals C. It's harder to imagine, but just as powerful.
So am I right? That challenges everything, I think, because when you were talking initially, I was trying to define in my mind whether you were using right brain, left brain. Oh, well, engineering is obviously, I can never remember which is which. Right brain is analytical and logical.
I don't remember either.
I think if anybody knows, stick it in the chat box. I can't remember which is creative and which is analytical and logical. But I was thinking, oh, well, engineering is analytical, logical. You break it down, you've got the facts, you find the solution's there. But it isn't, is it? It merges the two because you're completely creatively involved in finding the connections and creating something of your own through it. You're not just picking a fact out of the ether that's already there. You're designing and creating as an artist does, aren't you?
To me, it's a lot like music, and it's easier to make that distinction with music because we have instruments that have already kind of made, they're sort of granular. You've got so many keys on a piano. You have rules about scales. There are musical rules that you learn. If you go and you learn music, these are things you're going to learn, and they're the underpinning of the art that you make. You know these rules, and then when they become second nature to you, you're using them without thinking about it to do something artistic. And I think the same thing happens here.
you've just put something into words that I haven't been able to describe to anyone. That is how I feel about when people talk about how they're working on the technical aspects of narrating when they're in the booth. And my mind just wants to scream, because to me, the big challenge is you learn the markup, you learn the nuances and the tech as well as you can before you get in the booth.
Yep.
So that you can forget it.
Yep. But you have to constantly be adding to it too. There's always something else to learn to keep adding back into that sort of subconscious foundational knowledge that you will then elaborate on creatively while you're actively doing the work.
And if you're not, then if you're trying to figure it out and learn it while you're in the booth, then you're not paying attention. And Scott just came back. Thank you, Scott. Left brain is analytical, right is creative. Oh, see, I thought it was the other way around. I think it's because I get it confused with politics, which we won't bring up here. But yeah, left brain is analytical, right is creative. So, okay. Oh, I love
and
that.
Imagine it. Just imagine somebody taught you music and you're learning to play the guitar and they're just like, well, just feel your way through it, you know, just feel it. You know, that's not where you start teaching somebody music.
Yeah, you have to.
You teach them how to do their scales. You teach them what the notes are. You learn your way around the fretboard. You learn how to play "Mary Had a Little Lamb." You go through these stages of foundational knowledge. But we kind of assume you already have that because everybody knows how to talk, right? There's this assumption of foundational knowledge and that everything is created, but there is foundational knowledge to be gained. Right, that there is this foundational knowledge to be gained, but it's hard to teach. For this, it's like you've got a piano with 1,000 keys on it or something. It's because it's not as rigidly broken down as it would be in music, and it hasn't been disassembled to that extent. I don't know. I think this stuff is really interesting. So
I think it's fascinating. And the thing is, you've seen these. Do you know how many posts I've seen of very new narrators, like the first time? And they post, because I know the feeling. And they're like, oh my God, I can't talk. I literally can't talk. I can't say the simplest sentence without screwing it up, because people do think that it's so natural. It's what we do every day of our life. And then they go in and they try to do it professionally. You know, like a writer would have the same thing, huh?
I think people get discouraged coming into that because there's that presupposition that you already have all the tools that you need. That everything beyond that is inspiration and creativity and talent to be able to read well, but it's not. There's this whole big gap in just basic, boring, foundational knowledge that's the bridge that you have to cross to get to being able to narrate well. And
even if you cross it, you keep coming up to it, don't you? That bridge keeps showing up again.
You know, what's the curriculum for that? I mean, a lot of it is really simple, basic stuff, but it's difficult to talk about. And if you do talk about it, sometimes you sound like a bit of a doofus because it seems self-evident. But when you really look at it and take it apart, there's a lot to be learned.
Yeah, I love that, because I've started to realize that the real challenge, and we've all read the book, or a lot of us have read the book, The War of Art, or The Art of War, The War of Art by Pressfield. And he talks about the gremlins. And have you read that book? It's a short book. You got to read it. He talks about the gremlins, right? It's like it's not like one of those classics. Oh my God, you haven't read it. It's like a trendy kind of like, you know what I mean? But he talks about the gremlins. And I do believe that the biggest battle, and I never thought that when I went from being a freelancer to being a freelancer, I thought the biggest battle would be doing the work. Resistance. Yeah, Lori, he talks about resistance. The biggest battle I thought would be doing the work. But I don't know if any of you have ever experienced it when you've got like a deadline and you're sitting in your chair and you're like, okay, I've got to go in the other room now. I've got to go in the other room. And 4 hours later, you're like, I've got to go in the other room now. And it's the inner battle. It's the facing yourself every single day and getting that out of the way. So then, as you say, you can go in there and use those tools with a clear mind, you know, for the book. Because when you're doing developing and you were doing the job for a long time, was there an element of being able to just like, not write it in, but put your mind on break and just do the work? because you can't do that in narrating.
Now you really have to think about it all the time, and you have the same problem. It's like the blank page for a writer or the blank canvas for an artist. You sit down and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to get over this hump of just getting going on this task that I need to do. And usually once you've started, you're in. I always call it breaking the ice. The first chapter on any book, I get in and break the ice as quickly as I can.
Yeah. Because
once the ice is broken, nothing is as daunting.
Yeah, you don't have to read that book because that's pretty much the entire book. It is. It's like the Conditional Living. There's another one. It's one of my favorite in the world. You would think that I would remember the title, but the whole premise, but it's a brilliant premise, is just do it. At any given time, the universe is calling you to do something. There's something you should be taking an action to do. Just do it. Stop thinking about it and do it. And the way you feel will come later. You do the action first and you think about it later. I'm not, I've read the book and I'm not saying I live it. But so do you have any tricks or tips to help your productivity? Have you ever had a challenge with that? Or are you just so passionate about what you do that, because you're on Discord, so that's an automatic accountability, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's the main trick that I have, is just having a way to make myself have accountable office hours. That's what I need. And it's just good for my mental health too, because then I get done at a specific time and I don't dribble it out throughout the day, really consuming my whole day, but maybe not getting as much work done. I get my work done and I'm out. So that for me is really valuable. And apart from just thinking of all of the work as something that is something I'm kind of sharpening myself on, it's never just work. It's never just static work. It's always something that I can be using to get better so that the next book is better. Apart from that, I'm not too ripe with tricks, but
what about your writing? Are you, because you're a writer.
Not really. I enjoy writing, but
kind of are a writer. I hate to tell you.
I don't write. I like language a lot, which I think is useful for reading language out loud. But honestly, this job is so much. Somebody else does all the hard work. I just get to come in and put on the whipped cream. It's kind of cool. I feel like I'm cheating.
I don't want to tell the writers that their job is so much harder.
Their job is so much harder. You have to pull the whole thing up out of the mud, and we just get to hose it off a little. But
the thing is, I've read things that you've written, and you seriously are a writer. Like, if these careers don't work out, Travis.
Well, I'm content to have, my interest in writing be useful in doing this. I did get to do a little bit of sort of almost writing. There was a book I did recently that was a translation. I'm not going to name it. Okay. And one of my prerequisites for doing it was the translation was rough. And I didn't know what the book was before I accepted it, because they hadn't done the deal yet. But it turned out after I'd taken the book and finally got to see it, it turned out that I was contingent that I did it for the publisher to be able to do the book. So it kind of put me in a tight spot, and being able to say, oh no, this has not really been edited that well. But I got I got carte blanche to just line edit it as I read it. So it was the weirdest book I've ever done. Wow. So we just rephrased anything that didn't work throughout the whole book. There's no way it would whisper sync. Not going to whisper sync. But it was also really rewarding, because we took something that was going to come across pretty clunky and we're able to kind of paper across the cracks. It was nice. It was nice.
And when you came out the other side, I'm really noticing this. The hardest times I have, I got really, really, really sick, like really sick. And I thought, oh my God, career finished. That's it. But what I hadn't realized, I'm starting to feel a little better. I went in the booth, and because I'd been sick for 6 months working through, I hadn't realized how much slower I'd become. I still did my all, but like, I'm coming through out the other side, and I think I'm a way better narrator than I was when I started, because I did the hard stuff. Have you ever noticed, like, the book that you have the biggest issues with, or the book that you have the hardest time getting your brain around, and you know what I mean? Afterwards, like Alice falling down that hole, she's like, gosh, after this, I won't think anything of falling off the roof with a cat or something.
when all that hard work is where you sharpen yourself up, you're really kind of refining your ability to do stuff. So when you come out the other side, you're probably significantly better. The
Yeah,
hardest stuff is the
that's how, yeah, I wish I was a little more graceful under fire, but yeah. So
I sometimes wish the exact same thing.
what characteristics and tendencies do you have to fight? Like, what have you learned? What do you wish you could tell Travis who first started narrating?
Um, Mostly what I would talk to myself is about like my expectations for how my career should go, what I should target and why, what I should be aiming for. Because when you start, you're just kind of coming in blind, and all of your presuppositions about what you should be doing and what would be like, what's a successful career for me are all based on somebody else's career and what you see around you. Oh, look, this person is well known for doing stuff. What did they do? What are they doing? Well, maybe that's what I should do. And so all of my expectations at the start, not knowing any better, are set by that. And I've revised them over and over and over since I started. And so the career that I have doesn't even remotely resemble the career I thought I was going to aim for. And so I think I would probably talk to myself about that.
I love that you give yourself permission to revise them. And I especially love that you then turn around and give all the rest of us permission. And you did a post about the way what you think is your good career, what is a success for you. And you put it on like one of those groups, I can't remember what group, I'm not going to name any groups because I can't remember it anyway, but one of those groups that I tend to hide from my timeline because I know it's just going to make me feel bad about myself. If I'm busy or if I'm having a great time and I've just booked a publisher book and I think I'm like the bee's knees, those groups are all amazing. I'm Miss Social. But sometimes if you're not having a great time and you're working for like your indie writers and you're hoping to catch up on that and you haven't sent publisher letters for a while and you go on those groups, and you would think looking at those groups that if you're not only exclusively working with publishers, you're obviously not a professional. And, you need to buy that floating booth that's hanging from the middle of your room and, or move to a different state or something to do what needs to be done to work exclusively with publishers. And there's a whole other world out there. And somebody just said to me that I had given them permission to feel good about working with indie writers.
Yeah.
And my first reaction was, she thinks I'm an indie narrator. She thinks I'm not a publisher narrator. It's horrible that is still the prevailing feeling, that you're a failure if you work anything other than publisher.
And there isn't there's not some shadow council meeting in a fortress in the Alps deciding who is a professional and who is not. It's really just down to you and whether you're doing work that supports you and that you feel that you're growing doing. And that's it. And I think people would be surprised at how incredibly successful indie narrators can be and how incredibly successful indie authors who self-publish can be. And just how, because the scale of that success is far beyond, I think, what a lot of people assume. Just by the same token, a lot of people who do narration work for publishers may only do it for a couple of them, and every once in a while, it's maybe it's not that steady. Maybe you're having to hustle for it. Maybe it's not books that are necessarily books that you want to build your career around. It's going to be different everywhere. And
the work you do for your indie writer, the good ones, they love their work. They're putting their trust for something they've killed themselves to do in you. And by far, do you not find the relationships I've made with some of my writers, a couple of my first writers, dearest friends, if I lost this entire career tomorrow, I'm a far better person.
Yeah.
For the people that I've met.
There's a presupposition of like professionalism, like that if you're working for a publisher, that everything is going to be extremely professional, and that as an indie, it's going to be slapdash. And in my experience, nothing could be further from the truth. Indies who are doing well have their stuff together. They are operating like a business. They have a good income. they are paying up front, and they were willing to pay premium prices to get their books done to a quality level that is acceptable to their audience. They're not here for sloppy slapdash things that come in late. They have no interest in that. They're professionals. They just did not choose to go through a publisher. By the same token, I have worked for publishers where nobody answers emails and things are late. There's issues with the script. There's audio production problems that, because they're a larger machine that outsources a lot of components. It doesn't always go that smoothly. So a lot of these kind of like this sort of obvious knowledge about how things work and about what's good and what's bad and what's professional and what's, kind of the JV is not necessarily true. Now that's, again, it's going to be different everywhere and for everything. There's plenty of, you can find exceptions to everything, but I work probably 70 to 80% indie direct, and I do a lot of it. And it's good. It's not.
Well, there's a stigma in their world as well. There's a stigma, but that stigma is going away because there are some powerful indie writers that are self-publishing, not because they can't get a publisher, but because they want control.
And they'll make a lot more money.
Yeah.
By the time you publish, a bunch of people have wetted their beaks along the production pipeline, and you go through a publisher, and also your book doesn't come out for 6 months, and you have to audit to get your royalty reports and all this other nonsense. And people who don't care as much about your product as you do are the ones pushing it. There's good reason for a lot of people to indie publish. So. And having worked with and interacted with them, they're on it.
Yeah. And they can teach us a lot about marketing and PR and
well, there's
productivity. We're the same people. It's just that they have to come up with it out of the ether, and we get to use their word.
One of the cool things is that if you're working with people like that, you're working directly with people like that. You're not working through several layers. You're developing a relationship with people who care about what they're doing, who are very, very invested in it, and who put out extremely high quality work that you get to develop a personal relationship with, which is really gratifying. Just personally, it's very gratifying to work with people who are good at what they do and care about doing it. And that it's not just part of the assembly line process that you happen to be merging with just for this one little book.
Right.
It results in a lot of opportunities further down the line because people like that tend to also work and congregate and talk to other people like that. So it'd be hard to overvalue.
I know. But I think I think it's getting to be less, don't you now?
I think people are discovering that. I think people who are discovering that. And you can see it kind of reflected in ACX, where a lot of these books that are indie books don't just get flopped up on ACX, where the author doesn't really know what to do. They're just hoping to get some auditions, and maybe there's some good ones. They're just using it as a publishing platform. They already know what they're doing. They're specifically reaching out to individual narrators. They're on top of it. They probably have a personal assistant or somebody in charge of audio production that they've hired to take care of these things, because they are successful and they want to spend their time writing. So they hired other people to help them out. And they're very deliberate about it in a way that also narrators have begun to pick up on.
And their work is good.
And their work is good.
It takes
I have read so many amazing indie books. I have read so many amazing indie books. I read a lot of Gamelit and Lit RPG, which people also like to poop on a little bit.
Really? See, I thought everyone wanted to do those and everyone was jealous. And the only reason you couldn't is because nobody thinks they're hip enough.
I think people are jealous of the scale of the work because there is a lot of it and it's clear that they're successful, but there's still a certain amount of I don't know, I want to say quality shaming, where they have expectations that these are, popcorn thin stories that don't have much to say and are really just out there doing that. But you get a lot of really great stories about that deal with the same things all good books deal with, human problems, that make them relatable and interesting, and they can have a lot of heart and they can be extremely well written. Some of my favorite books have been in those genres, and I did not expect that when I started. This was not I didn't expect to do a lot of the work that I do when I started. In fact, I didn't really, I was like, that's probably just kind of I'm ashamed to say it, but I was like, this is probably just, it's just like somebody's web novel. It's not going to be edited. Nothing's going to be, what a horrible thing to think. But I did, and I disabused myself of that notion over time. And I feel fortunate that I did.
Yeah. Yeah. But Amy says vocally lit RPG are so fun. Action, quirky characters, accents. She loves narrating them. I've only ever done one and it was really short, but I love the genre itself because it's unique, it's hip. It's like, to me, it's like art. It's like street art, right? It's like the stuff that I'm interested in, the newest stuff. It's not old retelling of things. It's where new things
well,
are
what
happening.
A unique opportunity. It's something that's effectively new, that is developing fast, that is extremely popular, and that you can be involved with. As opposed to coming into something that is established and calcified and you know exactly what to expect, where other people have already, taken the beachhead, where you're just coming in behind. Now, this is an area where it's legitimately new and hasn't fully formed yet, that you can be involved in. I mean, how exciting is that? It's scary because it's like, again, you're not relating it to all the things you know. Yeah. Oh, I should work for the big five, I guess is the big four now or whatever. And I should do, my ultimate goal is to do, a mystery for some well-known author. But instead, you can be in the frontier.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more, to stake a claim on out there.
And also, but I'm learning because I've been doing more nonfiction, but I'm telling myself it's like the diet, right? Like nonfiction is the healthy food, and like my thrillers are the chocolate and the booze, right? Of course, I'm going to want as much chocolate and booze as I can get, but the nonfiction, the healthy food, I'm always happy afterwards, because although you wouldn't jump at the chance, the minute you get it, you do learn something, and it does change you and forces you.
Well, and just like anything else, there's so much that an author can choose to say in that format.
Yeah.
There's so much that can be relatable in surprising ways.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's about learning, isn't it? And growing. And I know that sounds so cliche. Be your most authentic self. It really is getting annoying. I've been on social media too much. That, along with narcissists and empaths, it's like so overused. But it's true, isn't it? It's like we've all had, like, you see, you didn't have a boring job. You've only ever done jobs you love.
Oh, it had plenty of boring time. It's like any job. This job is boring sometimes. Do you want to do pickups? Not right now.
I know,
but not really. Everybody's got its boring stuff.
But there were jobs you loved.
There were jobs that I loved.
Yeah.
But now I don't care if I ever do them again.
But it's a whole different thing than doing a job you hate.
It is. And I'm very grateful, no longer to clean out cow stalls and haul hay. So I'm happy to never do that again.
Did you clean out cow stalls and haul hay?
I did. I was a farm kid, so everything about my life has been, how do I not
become a
haul
farm
hay
person
and shovel cow crap?
No wonder you wake up so god awfully early in the morning.
I like it in the morning. Nobody I like quiet. That's probably why I get up in the morning. That's my Zen time, where nobody else says anything or does anything.
So when you were on a farm, did you spend like Wuthering Heights, like all the time out in the fields dreaming about your life? And what was it like on a farm?
I grew up on a dairy farm in Texas. So, farm work is mostly hard work, hard, relatively solitary work.
In Texas, did you wear cowboy boots and cowboy hats?
Oh, yeah. I had cowboy boots and cowboy hats. I had a horse. I did it all. Yeah, I did. If you want cliche farm kid stories, I'm sure I have them.
I think that's so cool, because that's very exotic.
It's deeply uncool.
It's deeply for uncool. A girl from Fresno, California. That is very cool and exotic. You know what I mean? I'm embarrassed to say I've got the cowboy boot fetish, and I like to, I've got a pair at home that I have never ever worn
I'm fairly
because
sure I had chaps. Fairly sure I had chaps.
what are
I remember
chaps?
wearing them. They're those kind of leather uh, overpants that you put on your jeans to keep from having your jeans torn up when you're riding through, thistle and brush
Really?
on your horse. Anyway,
But, oh wow. So
and then
did
if
you
you're
grow?
going to an EDM concert, you don't wear anything but that
What's EDM?
electronic dance music.
Oh, okay. So okay, so it's not like your whole life was like footloose or
No, no. By the fourth grade, I was no longer a farm kid per se. I did do when I was in middle school and high school. I did like 4-H and FFA. I raised animals and showed animals. Napoleon Dynamite, that bit where they're judging milk. That's basically my life. But eventually, I didn't do that anymore either. Thankfully.
I think it's wonderful though. I think it informs, I bet you got work ethic, appreciation of
I
things.
doubtless. Well, and you do appreciate being able to do work that requires you not to be out in the sun. I do. I have a fair skin. I like being able to, be indoors.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was where we're from, it's like very large, but it was still small town mentality. Like the day you turned 18, you moved
Yeah,
fast to
yeah.
either LA or San Francisco as fast as you could. So it's like I get that being the kid, like you can't wait until your
Yeah,
birthday.
yeah. My the first town I grew up in, I think the population broke 1,000 when they put in a penitentiary and they put it in the city limits so you get the tax revenue. So we had a dime store.
You had a dime store.
We had a dime store.
I love
It was still
that.
called the dime store. I don't think much but Jolly Ranchers were sold there for a dime, but they still called it a dime store.
I
Um,
love that. But that's part of what I like about the thrillers, the Linwood Barclay and the Stephen King, because when they can bring in those little details of
yeah,
the
there's small
towns in
town. Yeah,
America,
there's small
yeah,
town vibe. Yeah,
and
yeah.
make me feel like I'm there. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
love that. That gets me on an audiobook. You can put all the naked men on the covers you want, and I'm going to go straight for Linwood Barclay. so, so your books now,
Uh-huh.
your writers, your books, you're going along. You've kind of got your groove. What's your dream? What's your like? Do you have any big, massive goal or dream, or are you a more in the present kind of person?
Um, I mean, my dream is just to continue to enjoy doing the work and to appreciate it for the work that I'm doing now, with the expectation that I'll continue to get better and better books, more interesting books will come along. But the great thing about the job is that you're always reading something new. So I I have a tendency in the past to always be trying to get to the goal. And then once I'm there, I have about 30 to 40 seconds of satisfaction. And then I'm like, oh, now what? It's like the end of Finding Nemo, where the fish are all sitting in the bags. And that's me at the end of any goal that I have been pushing toward, without paying attention to the work along the way. So I have in my elderly years now, I've decided that I need to spend my energy on appreciating what I'm doing now and not worry so much about some nebulous end goal. As long as I'm capable of supporting myself. And since I'm in a position now where I don't have to worry about, oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills? What am I going to do? I'm not in that constant state of stress where I need to get to a plateau
Yeah.
where I'm sustaining myself. Then I want to make sure that I'm just enjoying it and appreciating it for what it is.
So the Maslow hierarchy, you're able to take care of your basic, and you remind me a lot of Johnny Heller. You always remind me a lot of Johnny Heller in the way that you both seem very cemented in the process and now. And you know what's funny, what you just said about that, about what you did with the goals. Um, I'm fascinated by the whole dopamine thing. I'm a bit of a geeking out on it, right? And people think dopamine is like a hit of some satisfaction you get when you get something, but dopamine is the desire. Dopamine creates the desire to pursue things like sex and alcohol and whatever is going to make us
Hmm.
feel good. And you only get a limited amount of dopamine depending on, and it restores itself, but not as often as we would like. So everything you use it for, right? So if you get that hit, if you're like checking like online shopping or internet games or notifications like constantly, you keep hitting up for extra dopamine, and you've run out of reserves. It's not replenished fast enough. And if you get a big hit of dopamine, like a brilliant book or something really exciting, so if one of your goals comes true, that's a big hit of dopamine, your reserves go down lower than they were in the beginning.
Yeah.
So you don't enjoy it. So
Yeah.
that's why addicts become addicts.
That tracks.
I think it's fascinating. And you just keep, you're never going to get what you want.
Yeah.
Because you're never going to be satisfied because you're chasing the extra high.
Yeah.
And you're not going to
get
it.
That's certainly how I spent a lot of my life. So I've been consciously trying to not do that. I guess I will say that one goal I have, that's just an ongoing goal, is just to continue to meet and work with interesting, cool writers that are people that I enjoy interacting with, because that's something that's not over once you do it. When you meet and work with someone new that you develop a relationship with long term, that's something that perpetuates itself. It's not like a goal that you check off and you're done. Oh, met them. Whoop, whoop, we're done now. Yeah. It's something that continues to sustain itself afterwards. So it feels very different. And so as a long-term goals is building those relationships and just getting the opportunity to interact with nice, interesting people.
Yeah.
Which is really valuable to me. And another reason why doing indie book work is so rewarding.
Yeah. It goes beyond the books, doesn't it? You become friends and you learn things from them about life.
I just went to Dragon Con a couple of weeks ago, and my only reason for going there was to meet authors that I've worked with, and it was fabulous.
Have you ever seen the movie Paul? Have you ever seen the movie?
Is that the one where he's the alien?
Simon Pegg, yeah.
Yes.
Is that what Dragon Con's like when they go to the convention?
I don't know. This is the only one I've been to, and of course they had COVID restrictions, so it was like half population and everybody's masked, and so there's a lot of like restrictions to it. But it was like 40,000 people or something. But it's spread along multiple blocks of the city. But for me, I didn't go to any panels. I didn't go to the parade. I was only there just to hang out with and visit with people that I've either heard of, have met online, have worked with online, but never seen in person, or maybe only seldom, and just to spend time with them. And there was a whole bunch of them there for the kind of genre work that I do, and it was fabulous. I got to meet Will White, who I've done a bunch of his books. He's a really successful author, and I love him and his family. His family is basically his business. They all work together on his books.
I love that.
And I got to go have dinner with them. They did their own little deal for their fans, and it was just a fabulous experience. I had a wonderful time. That alone justified the trip.
I wish they had a thriller festival. Maybe I'll need to look into that.
Do they not? It feels like something they should have.
They might. I'm notorious for not liking to actually go in person anywhere, so I probably wouldn't know about it if they did. But yeah, I do need to step out more often because you get too insular in the booth. But you've got kids, so you're forced out, aren't you? Because
not
they're
really. My kids
creatures.
Are all pretty home, but well, the thing is, socialization for kids is a lot different than it used to be. You wanted a car, you wanted to go over to your friend's house. Now everybody has phones. They don't want to drive anywhere or go anywhere. They're just going to talk on,
But you
Snapchat
probably have kudos as a dad. You're like the cool dad with your job, aren't you?
I don't think any children think of their parents that way. Certainly not mine.
Really? See, that's why I don't have kids, because I keep the illusion that I am still cool.
The evolution has been totally punctured around here.
I love that. I love that. So in lockdown, how are your kids at the age that they can still make noise during the quarantine? Did you have that whole thing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think kids are at that age until they leave. So they don't so much walk. So they don't so much walk as fall from foot to foot. So
oh wow.
It's
challenging.
Well, now that they're going back to school, it's nice because I have my regular schedule and I'm usually done working by the time they're home. So it's not that big of a deal for me anymore. It was a little more challenging during the last year where they, were schooling from home, but also they had to be, they had to have their butts planted in front of a computer for their classes. So there wasn't as much thundering around upstairs looking for snacks.
So how do you tell your kids to stop playing the games, get off the computer? When you do what you do for a living, you kind of can't say that with any authority, can you?
Well, I'm not as ginchy about at screen time as a lot of people probably are, because it just depends on what they're doing with it. So
Okay.
my kids, uh, I don't care if they play some games, but also my youngest daughter likes to program and likes to research and was learning how to do 2D animation, and they both do art, and my oldest writes. So they use their computers for a lot of things that are creative too. So this
That's
sort of
good.
arbitrary like screen restriction when there's so much that they do is creative. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from them because I would have been annoyed when I was a child too.
Yeah.
So, I it's more about making sure you don't watch TV up until bedtime so you sleep well, that kind of stuff. It's normal parenting nonsense.
Yeah. I was reading with a flashlight under the covers till 3:30 in the morning,
Yeah,
all
I have to
through
take all the
school.
phones out. All the phones have to come out and charge overnight. Otherwise,
Oh, that's good. That's smart. Yeah. And I was reading the Marquis de Sade, all about Charles Manson and Wuthering Heights. It could explain a lot. They probably should have locked the bookcase. So, the confidence that you had to define your own terms in your career and to not be swayed by social media, did you have that when you started? Did you,
no,
how
no.
did you develop it? How long did it take you to develop it? How long did it take you to
I'm probably
get
still,
confident?
probably still developing. I mean, it's something I will probably wrestle with always to a certain extent, but I feel like I've made good inroads for me personally. I feel like the kind of work I do is not the kind of work that people review for audiophile. They just don't. That just doesn't happen to be who happens to be on. They just don't happen to read that kind of stuff. I'm not going to get submitted for Audies. That's not going to be where I get validation. But when you come into it, I mean, I'm like, that's what I want. That's what I want to aim for. And now I've kind of coming to terms with the fact that I don't really need to care, because
Mhm.
I do have a substantial audience of people that want to consume the stuff that I'm making, that are interested in it, and that I can be talking directly to, that want to listen to and interact with me. So why should I shouldn't devalue that. I shouldn't be chasing something else when I've got that right in front of me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it's that expectation of what is the path for a narrator, what does success look like, and what are the hallmarks of that success, and do I need those? And honestly, no, I don't. Not the traditional ones. And I'm still will wrestle with it. Boy, it really would be cool if this great book I did ended up in audiophile or whatever. I mean, it's not gonna, but that's okay,
Yeah.
But I still have that niggling voice that says, "Boy, it really would be really cool if it did, though." Everybody wants like a little plastic
Everything
trophy
changes though. The
or a
industry
certificate or
changes.
whatever. But um,
But your kind of books are growing quite fast and the industry changes. So there is a
yeah,
chance someday they could,
yeah,
start.
and it may, and like I say, it's something I think probably like everybody, I wrestle with. You have these feelings of inadequacy, or you're worried that you're not doing the right things, or that, someone's going to look down their nose at you and say, "Oh, you're on the junior varsity." But it
Yeah,
doesn't,
that's the feeling.
it doesn't,
It's like a whole world kind of, now that I think about it, isn't it like the beauty world and all the commercials saying, you're looking a bit old, you're getting to
yeah,
be in
it's
your
just,
30s. Maybe you should do something about that. That's kind of what it's done. And especially around award time. There was one award I hadn't realized that people could put themselves forward for. I thought, and I didn't know you put yourself forward and you pay for it, which is like a smart thing to do. It's marketing, it's branding. And,
mhm.
a lot of people do it. But there was one point where, like, I remember I'd gotten my flu shot or something, and I came home and I looked on the internet, and there were like, because of the people I know, in the industry, people, we all know each other. There were like 30 posts, I'm not kidding you, in a row. And each one of them was saying, oh my God, this came out of the clear blue sky. I had no idea. Thank you so much to the publishers and writers for believing in me so much and putting me forward for this. And I thought, oh my God, I really must be a loser. The thought of wading into the whole thing, it feels a bit like playing dodgeball in school. Like I am
Yeah.
gonna get hit by that ball hard. So I just gave you a window into my school, didn't I? But, yeah.
I remember dodgeball.
Remember
Um,
dodgeball? It's
I
like a
remember
mug's
dodgeball.
game. Like I think that's like child cruelty, actually. shouldn't be allowed.
What was I going to say? I was going to say something. That's one of the other things I would say to myself from earlier. To me, earlier in career me is like, this stuff is, what you're doing is worth your time. It's inherently valuable.
Yeah.
It's not a stepping stone to somewhere else. It's not a thing that you do to get over to the good stuff. Just work on making this the good stuff, and you'll get to someplace you're happy with faster. Like I'm really fortunate, and I'm unbelievably fortunate, and I'm just really thankful for it at this point. And I think that there's probably, a reasonable number of us that could, if we weren't trying to get to the good stuff, could find that fortunate state in the things that are available to us now.
And ironically, the very day I was in my defense, I just had my vaccine shot and I was like not at my best self. But that same day, in retrospect, I was working on a thriller that I would have killed to work on. Was my dream book. Was exciting and fun and stretching me and like my dream. Mm-hmm. And I was whining, literally having like an overdramatic breakdown because I hadn't been magically awarded some award I'd never even heard of in my life until that day, right? Because you forget to be grateful and ask yourself, what am I doing today? Like, what is my job today?
I think we all feel really unsure about our own evaluation of our progress. We all want some external valuation that says, oh yeah, nope, you really are on the right track. You really are doing what you should be doing.
The badge.
Especially for this kind of work where you work by yourself, you work for yourself, by yourself. Nobody gives you a quarterly evaluation.
Yeah.
Not that I think those are fabulous anyway, but nobody's giving you that sort of outside about your work directed input. You only get it from yourself. Yeah. So to a certain extent, I think a lot of us feel starved for it, that we want that external validation. Just to let us know at least we're on the right track. For God's sake, please tell me I'm doing the right thing. But we mostly have the data to make that determination already. Are people asking me to do work? Are people listening to it? Am I getting paid? Is my rent paid?
Are we the voice?
We have these validations. They exist, but
But beyond that,
you're cooler if it comes with lucite.
But also you're the voice that could save someone on a bad night or a bad day of their life, and they've got something to distract you. I mean, I think that you got such a good point though, because we lose that. We're born with that. We play and we're so proud of what we've played, what we've done. We, dress up in front of our family for Christmas and do an act, and it's the coolest thing on earth. Do the Christmas play at school. And we don't need validation, but we're institutionalized out of it, aren't we? Yeah. School and work and but at the end of the day, I know our school play, they gave me a lead part, and that's why I was like, I'm going to be an actress. And I found out years later it was because she said I couldn't sing and she didn't want me in the chorus.
Oh.
But I didn't know that at the time. So it didn't matter. It's like when you're a kid, it's like your kids doing all those creative things for the pure joy of it. I'm going to stick
that's what you hope. That's what you want to hopefully leave them with, right? Is like, do this because it makes you feel right. Don't do it just for somebody else. Do it because it makes you feel right. And this just makes me think about the writers too, because we have an opportunity with every book we do to validate for the writer what they're doing, for them to hear back and for somebody else to hear back what they did from somebody who obviously got what they were trying to do. When we understand what their book is and they can hear it when we're bringing life to it audibly, then they're like, they got what I was saying. Whenever an author talks to you and says, you got the joke, you got the character, you got the scene, you got the feeling, then they're getting that same validation. Somebody else understood what I was trying to do and made it work. I was not not shouting into the void. So it's a pretty cool opportunity that we have. And, you know, hopefully it's a bit of a feedback loop. We do that, they recognize it, and we're like, oh yeah, well, I guess we did our job too.
I love,
Mutual back
love,
pats.
love that. I've never thought of it that way. I really love that. I really love that. Sorry, I'm speechless. No, but I've never thought of it that way. I've thought about the people that we help through bad times, we're their voice. But I've never thought that because I see writers all the time on Twitter and everything, and oh, I can't get with a big publisher. What do I do? I'm facing this blank sheet. And I think, oh my God, if only you could tell them your writing is amazing. But we are telling them, aren't we?
I mean, that's the goal. I mean, what a fraught thing for an author. You slave over this book for God knows how long. You finally put it out there. You just want somebody to read it. And then you give it to somebody else who has never read it before, isn't you, and you're trusting them to get what you're trying to do. You know, it's kind of like a precarious position to feel yourself in. And you can tell with a lot of authors who are doing audio for the first time, that's exactly how they feel about it. It's like, oh, I'm giving my baby away to somebody else.
And what you want is, and I tell people this about Findaway, because when I have a writer on Findaway, yes, it's a note system and you can't communicate until you upload your sample, right? But I always reach out and open a conversation with them. And I notice a lot of people avoid that because they think if they're communicating too much, they're inviting micromanaging. But it's the opposite. I beg for micromanaging up to the point of the sample. I say it has to be 100% perfect for you, because this is what you're going to get at the end. Let's work together as hard as we can now so that you're happy, because I might not be the right person for you if it's not exactly the way you want it. And at the end of the day, what I found, it's transformed my relationships, because they know that they're with someone that wants the best for their book, that is professional and confident enough, and has listened enough at that point that then they can let it go, because they just want somebody that can convince them that they've got this. Because it's your baby. You don't want to hand your baby to somebody that's like, don't tell me what to do.
Yep. I will bend a lot of kind of like best practices for dealing with clients in service of a good relationship, to a point. I mean, for a good relationship, you can usually tell with your interactions with a writer what kind of relationship that has the opportunity to be, right? Some people are not gonna, there's no chance for it to be a good relationship, but some of them you can tell that you're gonna get along with these people, that you are on board with their creative aims and that you want them to be successful. And I will bend a lot further in service of a good relationship for somebody who wants to do good things. So, I mean, I don't charge people for books until they're live. That's normally you charge them, and here we're doing the little handoff at night. You give me the money, you push the money over here, I'll push the audio over. Okay, we're good. I didn't get stiffed. I don't do that. I haven't been stiffed yet. Someday I probably will be. But for me, the advantage that I can get, since I work primarily with indies, money is always a big deal, and it's expensive to make an audiobook. So I generally try and make the window as small as possible for them to pay for the book and be receiving income from the book. So we don't invoice until after it's done. That's not established best practice. It's just kind of an example, but it's something that I feel strongly about doing because of the kind of people I work with and the kind of relationship I want to build with them. They know that I'm on board. I want them to be successful. I trust that they're going to pay me. I've never been proven wrong yet. Again, someday it'll probably happen, but I'm also willing to risk that in exchange for those relationships, for that karmic bonus to the relationships as a whole.
And the book, and it's a piece of you that you're putting out, and it's a piece of them, and it doesn't serve either of you to put bad relationship in that equation. It's got to be.
And even from a business standpoint, if they can make it easier to financially justify doing more books, because they know they're not going to be out of pocket for several months, while language is on ACX or something. When they know that I'm going to get my payment from Amazon or ACX within 30 days of this going live, when they can rely on that, they know that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes things more reliable for them. So if I can make
Mm-hmm.
things reliable for them, then that also potentially means more work.
Mm, never heard that one before. Yeah, I see how it would work and how it's, quite like that.
That's a really common thing, especially if you have people who are putting out lots of books, because
Yeah.
you do 10 books in a month, that's $50,000, $40,000 that they've got to lay out before any of them make any income. So as
And
soon as
I
it starts
had
to
one
scale
like
up,
that. And because of the whole Corona thing, when that started, she stopped doing audiobooks.
right? So, I want to avoid that stop for people who can still make money on their book. I don't want to ever put anybody in a position where they're like, I'm encouraging them to do a book that's not going to make them money,
Yeah.
you know? But when you can either pull the punch a little bit for the cost, or you can ensure that it's an easier gap for them to weather. For me, that's worth my time, and
Yeah.
that's worth my temporary investment.
Yeah. And it's easy. I remember when I first started, you make money slower than you think you will when you first start. And so I always had that uncomfortable, there was like about 6 months where there was this uncomfortable moment of, oh, please let them pay me. Right. When it was in the beginning. And I remember I had one writer, there was a problem um, with the paying. I can't remember what it was, whatever we were paying through, it just didn't go through. And they
Hmm.
were like, can you just trust us? We're good for it. It's a publishing company. And but I had been burned really, really badly by the book
Hmm.
before, where she said, in retrospect, I think I would prefer a Latin male voice for my book.
After you'd
And
recorded the whole thing or something.
yeah, and tried really hard to communicate with her the entire process. And you are tempted to go, you did realize that I'm not male or Latin, right?
Yeah.
But
I
she
feel like
didn't
you
pay
should have
me.
had an early warning. Yeah,
Yeah,
and the
exactly.
thing is, I think that's just a given that there's going to be certain people who are intractable and
Yeah.
who it's not possible to have a good relationship with, and who are going to be unreasonable. It's going to happen.
Yeah. But now I
Um,
would know. Now we wouldn't get
you
past
have
the
there's
sample.
more you get more early warning. I also think that the earlier you are in your career, the more likely you are to run into people like that,
You are, because you
because you're in
don't know
that kind of
better.
you're in that scrambling stage. You don't know better, they don't know better. As you kind of establish yourself, then like there's some sort of, they've passed a certain height on the sign there, you must be this tall
Yeah.
to ride.
Yeah.
They have now passed that height, and so the likelihood that you're going to have those same sorts of problems goes down a little bit. It doesn't go away,
Doesn't go
but
away.
it is
But
reduced.
and you shift, you're in charge, because the next book, I think, which is, sorry, I got off track, was I said no to her. And I've never gotten another book. We ended on good terms. We were friends. I said, I can't
Hmm.
take a chance. I have to be firm in my policy. Now, I would, of course, I wouldn't mind. But in the beginning, and I think I'm saying this for the person that has maybe 3 or 4 books out there, in the beginning, you don't know. And there's nobody can teach you that. A coach isn't going to teach you that. You learn
No.
the things that you can't put up with, and the things that you can maybe,
Yeah.
like your thing with the payment, you learn what you're willing to.
Yeah. And everybody's going to have their own rules and best practices for dealing with clients, with books, with other people, and it's okay to develop them as long as you feel confident that they're what you're about. That they're serving what you want to accomplish, and they're not going to leave you totally high and dry too often.
And you feel proud of yourself, don't you, when it really is your business, because it's you.
Yeah. I
It's
want to do work the way that I want people to see me. I
Yeah.
want,
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So we won't use the word authenticity. We'll say, Travis, you've become more youer
more you. There
than
we go.
possible. um, okay, so I'm going to put you on the spot. Famous last words. What would you like to leave with the YouTube audience that's getting this out of the time lock vault in 60 years, and they're going to hear what you think is the most
Wow.
important thing to leave them with?
Wow. Well, if it's coming out in that long in the future, then I'm just going to say, I hope you got into Gamelit now.
Very good, very good. Very good. Do you think having an old voice like mine would be a problem with Gamelit?
No.
Do you think like it requires a certain sound?
No. I think that Gamelit appreciates character work. So being game for doing more colorful character work while still being, authentically human and relatable is probably one of the most key things.
I like that.
But it's closer to like doing animation work.
Okay.
It's not all the way. It's got its differences, and narrative voice is very, very different from anything that you would do for like VO. But it's closer to that. It's closer to that. But I think a lot of people do that and they fall into the trap of making it sound like, a cartoon for 5-year-olds, and that's not really relatable. It's not relatable. So you have to, there's a lot of nuance to it. It's scaled a little differently than, literary fiction.
Well, because you had another post that I loved about different sounds for different genres, which people swear blind there's no such thing as. And
they're
sorry.
Wrong. I'm sorry. They're actually just legitimately wrong.
There definitely is.
I have plenty of data to back it up. So I'm a very data-oriented person, and I have lots of data to assert that is just wrong.
And for thrillers, I listen for a certain type of male, edgy, gritty voice that speaks to me of Americana, the thriller. I know a Harlan Coben book when it's coming at me, or a Linwood Barclay. I want to be the female male.
Yeah. And we can quibble a lot about whether that's just the inherent in the voice that people tend to use for narrative. But given the breadth of work and how different those books are, I think there are a lot of core rules that really transcend the individual voice of the author and more about the genre and the audience that's specific to those genres.
Oh my
and I think
God,
you kind of ignore them all at your peril.
Hour ago.
You ignore them at your peril.
I wish I'd brought this up an hour ago. Okay.
Oh yeah, you're probably trying to wrap up. You don't have to.
I'll
talk forever, but
we might start losing people in a minute. I might need to beg you to come on again one day and do you think we could fill an hour-long call on genre tone?
I never shut up. So
I am fascinated by that subject.
Never shut up. We can talk about there's so much research you can do on other people's books. You can really gather this information by reading everybody else's reviews and listening to what they do and really pinning down, okay, what is this audience looking for? Look at how these trends are manifested in all of these reviews from these different narrators within these genres, and looking at these key things that are always jumping out. And you can make those changes and you can make those decisions and you can see them reflected in reviews. You can just, like I was saying earlier, iteration. You can do a thing, you can observe the result, and then you can adjust. And it's very repeatable.
And the thing is to do it with your analytical brain on, not your creative artist. Oh my God, what does that mean about me brain? Your ego doesn't get to play this game.
So there's also things like, there's all kinds of traditional wisdom. Like, when you take over a series, you're just going to have to make it your own, and you're just going to have to suck it up and take your punches because people don't like a narrator switch. You know what? You can do a lot about that. And it takes some work. And you're going to have to get the original audio, and you're going to have to get the text, and you're going to have to cross-reference, and you're going to have to get voice samples, and you're going to have to boil it down and do samples for yourself that reasonably match the intent of the characters that the previous narrator tried to get across. But you can do it, and you can do it really successfully. So where the people will give you a pass.
But don't you risk then your narration being an imitation of someone else and not yourself?
You don't. It's not the same. Imagine that you're just casting. Imagine that you're doing a reboot of a movie. You're casting the same characters. The characters are the same. You know where they're from. You know what they look like. You just don't have the same actors available to you because it was 30 years ago. You can still evoke the same thing. It's just casting.
I agree with this. And you're the first person that's talked about this that I agree with.
If you do this, listeners will notice it too. They'll be like, oh, obviously the voices are unique, but it captured the spirit of the characters. He obviously listened to the other book. I didn't listen to the whole book, but I listened to enough of it. So these are, anyway, I object to a lot of kind of like this sort of popular knowledge that you can't do this, you can't do that, or you just expect this to go bad. You're just going to have to take your lumps. There's so much you can do and so much that you can figure out by just observing what's happened on other books and how people responded to it. I know Nick
And
Padell,
Scott,
for instance, is really good about this. When Nick Padell has taken over
yeah,
books, he goes and does the research, and you can see it reflected in the reviews when Nick Padell does that.
I love it because Scott brought up James Bond. Different James Bond every few
Hmm.
years, same James Bond. You
Yeah.
forget that they've replaced the character.
Yeah. He doesn't certainly show up and he's French, you know. He's still James Bond. It's a different actor, but he's cast for the same archetypal role that is not fundamentally changed. You didn't just decide he was from Germany, you know, just because that was the voice you wanted to use. No, anyway.
I love that. Well, because it brings me back to what I want in my voice, what I want to get to is that male narrator that's doing the Jeff Harding that's doing a Linwood Barclay book, and he's got the edge. He's every man put into an unusual circumstance, and he's got that edge, and you
Hmm.
know exactly what you're set to listen to. And I've never heard a female do that, where she's got that every man, you know what I mean? And
Hmm.
you know what book you're expecting. I've heard a lot of great female narrators doing thrillers, but there is a thing with psychological thrillers. They're usually British anyway, but there, I think that there's a sound. I think there's a
Hmm.
sound, and I want to identify what it is, and I haven't been able to identify it. It's driving me nuts. So yeah, so I'm tempted to have you on for another call very soon, but it might be a little bit selfish because all I want to talk about is myself and my
That's okay. We can
thriller
do that.
tone.
Like it's clear I will yammer on for however long.
Yeah, I might need to maybe pay you for a coaching session, Travis. So,
Uh,
would you ever coach people?
I I have talked to people, but I've never coached anybody, and I don't think I would feel comfortable charging anybody for any coaching. I'm always happy to talk to people about stuff. I always call it a chat. I don't coach people, but I will chat with you.
Well, if we're going to do a chat, we'll make it a Joe chat because then I can at least pay you back with the new publicity I'm going to work on the cup of Joe. So, thank you so much. This has been a pure joy. I so wish
Thank you
this
so much
call
for having
wasn't
me.
ending. Thanks for coming. It's been brilliant. Thank you, everyone, for joining. It's been
Thank you, everybody.
wonderful. Take care of yourselves. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. The video will be out in about 2 weeks and definitely going to be chasing you, begging you to come back. So thanks very much, guys. Bye, everyone. Don't forget, please subscribe. Have your friends, your grandma, your aunt that doesn't know any better, subscribe to Cup of Joe. I'm doing good with the PR now.
You are.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys. Bye.